Before superhero movies became billion-dollar events, before red carpets were filled with capes, armor, and cinematic universes, there was one woman standing almost entirely alone at the center of a cultural storm. Her name was Lynda Carter, and when she stepped onto television screens as Wonder Woman, she didn't just play a character. She became a symbol. But behind the bright smile, the famous bracelets, the red boots, and the unforgettable transformation spin, there was a young woman who had no idea that one role would follow her for the rest of her life. Long before the world called her Wonder Woman, Lynda Carter was just a girl from Phoenix, Arizona, with a dream bigger than her surroundings. She was beautiful, yes, but beauty alone was never the full story. From a young age, she had something more complicated and more powerful: presence. She could sing, perform, command a room, and hold people's attention before she fully understood why. There was a quiet confidence in her, but also a vulnerability that would later become the secret ingredient behind her most famous role. Lynda did not grow up imagining that one day millions of people would see her as the face of female strength. Her first love was music. She performed in bands, traveled, sang on stage, and learned how to survive in front of audiences. That experience mattered. It taught her rhythm, discipline, timing, and most importantly, how to project emotion without saying too much. Then came the beauty pageant world. In 1972, Lynda Carter became Miss World USA, a title that opened doors but also created a problem. Hollywood often looked at women like her and saw only glamour. They saw a face. They saw a figure. They saw a marketable image. But Lynda wanted something deeper. She wanted to act. She wanted to be taken seriously. And that was not easy. In the 1970s, television was still dominated by male heroes, male detectives, male cowboys, male cops, and male action stars. Women were often written as love interests, assistants, victims, or side characters waiting to be rescued. A woman leading an action-adventure series was considered risky. A female superhero leading a network television show sounded almost impossible. That was the world Lynda Carter walked into. When the role of Wonder Woman came along, it was not just another audition. It was a test. The producers were not simply looking for someone who could wear the costume. They needed someone who could convince America that a woman could be powerful without being cold, glamorous without being shallow, gentle without being weak, and heroic without imitating a man. That balance was almost impossible to find. Many actresses could have looked striking in the costume, but Wonder Woman required more than beauty. She required dignity. She required warmth. She required a kind of sincerity that could survive a costume that, in the wrong hands, might have become ridiculous. The role could easily have turned into parody. It could have been campy, embarrassing, or forgotten. But then Lynda Carter walked in. There was something about her that changed the room. She had the height, the elegance, the dark hair, and the classic beauty that matched the comic book image. But what truly separated her was her attitude toward the character. She did not treat Wonder Woman as a joke. She did not play her as a fantasy created only for men. She played Diana Prince as a real woman with intelligence, compassion, and moral force. That was the difference. Lynda understood something many people around her did not. Wonder Woman was not powerful because she could throw a man across the room. She was powerful because she knew who she was. She did not need to dominate people to prove her strength. She did not need cruelty to appear strong. Her power came from conviction. And when Lynda put on the costume for the first time, everything changed. The transformation was immediate, but the pressure was enormous. She was young. She was still proving herself. And now she had to carry one of the most recognizable female characters in pop culture history on her shoulders. Every movement mattered. Every line mattered. Every look mattered. If she failed, the industry would not simply say one show failed. They might say a female superhero could never work. That was the burden she carried quietly. Behind the scenes, there were doubts. Could audiences accept a woman in this kind of role? Would men take her seriously? Would women support her? Would the costume overshadow the character? Would the show become a novelty instead of success? Lynda had to answer all of those doubts without giving a speech. She had to answer them by performing. And she did. When Wonder Woman reached television audiences, something unexpected happened. People didn't laugh her off the screen. They believed her. Children adored her. Women saw confidence in her. Men respected her presence. Families gathered around their televisions and watched a heroine who did not apologize for being strong. Lynda Carter became more than an actress in a role. She became part of people's childhoods, part of their memories, part of the way they imagined courage. But fame came with a strange kind of trap. The same role that made her iconic also threatened to define her forever. Hollywood has a way of turning success into a cage. Once the public sees you as one thing, it becomes difficult to convince them you are anything else. For Lynda Carter, Wonder Woman was both a blessing and a shadow. It gave her immortality in pop culture, but it also followed her everywhere she went. No matter what she did afterward, music, acting, advocacy, personal growth, the world kept looking back at that costume, that spin, that symbol. And yet, perhaps that is not a tragedy. Perhaps that is the price of becoming unforgettable. Because Lynda Carter did not merely become the original Wonder Woman. She became the standard by which every Wonder Woman after her would be measured. But becoming the standard came with a cost Lynda Carter could not have fully understood at the beginning. When audiences saw her as Wonder Woman, they saw perfection. They saw the glowing smile, the powerful posture, the effortless grace, and the heroic confidence. They saw a woman who seemed untouchable. But the truth was far more human. Behind the scenes, Lynda was still learning how to carry the weight of fame, expectation, and identity. She was not born a legend. She became one under pressure. The role demanded more than memorizing lines or hitting marks on a set. Every episode required her to exist inside a fantasy while making it feel emotionally real. She had to fight villains, deliver moral lessons, move with elegance, and maintain a presence that felt both regal and approachable. She could not be too aggressive, or people might call her unfeminine. She could not be too soft, or they might say she was not believable as a hero. She had to walk a narrow line, and every week, millions of viewers judged whether she succeeded. That kind of pressure can be invisible from the outside. To fans, Wonder Woman looked effortless. To Lynda, it was work. It was physical work, emotional work, and symbolic work. She was not just representing a television character. She was representing an idea that had been waiting for its moment. At a time when many women were fighting to be seen as equal, independent, capable, and complex, Wonder Woman appeared on television as a living answer to a cultural question. What does female strength look like? Lynda's answer was not anger. It was not arrogance. It was not imitation. Her answer was grace. That was what made her version unforgettable. She brought warmth to power. She made kindness look heroic. She showed that strength did not have to mean losing softness. In her performance, Diana Prince could be intelligent, compassionate, funny, elegant, and fearless all at once. She did not have to choose between beauty and bravery. She did not have to choose between femininity and authority. She could be all of it. And for many viewers, especially young girls watching from their living rooms, that image mattered deeply. They were not just watching a superhero defeat villains. They were watching a woman walk into danger without waiting to be rescued. They were watching someone stand tall in rooms where others underestimated her. They were watching a character who used power to protect, not to intimidate. And because Lynda Carter played her with such sincerity, the message reached people in a way that felt personal. But the more beloved she became, the more difficult it became for the world to separate Lynda Carter from Wonder Woman. This is one of Hollywood's strangest bargains. When an actor fails, the industry forgets them. But when an actor succeeds too completely, the industry may refuse to let them grow. Lynda had given the public exactly what it wanted, but that success came with a label. She was not just Lynda anymore. She was the Wonder Woman actress. She was the original Wonder Woman. She was the icon. Those words sound flattering, In many ways they are, but they can also become heavy. An icon is admired, but not always understood. An icon is celebrated, but not always allowed to change. People freeze icons in time. They keep them young, shining, smiling, and perfect in memory, while the real person continues to live, struggle, age, evolve, and search for new meaning. That was the complicated reality Lynda faced. After the show ended, she had to continue her life under the shadow of a character who never truly left her. Every interview, every appearance, every project came with the same question in the background. How does it feel to have been Wonder Woman? For some actors, that kind of association becomes a burden they reject. They grow bitter. They try to run from the role that made them famous. But Lynda Carter did something different. She embraced the role without allowing it to erase her humanity. Over the years, she came to understand that Wonder Woman belonged not only to her, but to the people who had found strength through the character. Fans would approach her and tell her stories about childhood, confidence, survival, courage, and hope. Some remembered watching her with their mothers. Some remembered pretending to spin in their bedrooms. Some remembered feeling, for the first time, that a woman could be the hero of the story. Those memories gave the role a meaning beyond Hollywood. For Lynda, it was no longer only about fame. It became about legacy. She realized that Wonder Woman had entered people's lives at moments when they needed a symbol. And whether she wanted it or not, she had become the face of that symbol. That realization changed everything. She did not treat the character as an old costume locked away in the past. She honored it. She defended it. She spoke about what Wonder Woman meant, not as a fantasy of perfection, but as an expression of courage, dignity, and compassion. She understood that the character's real power was never the lasso, the bracelets, or the invisible plane. The real power was the belief that goodness could be strong. And that belief stayed with her. As decades passed and new generations discovered Wonder Woman, Lynda Carter's place in pop culture only became more secure. The superhero genre exploded. Comic book characters became global franchises. Audiences became used to seeing heroes in armor, capes, masks, and cinematic battles. But long before all of that became normal, Lynda had stood there under bright studio lights, carrying the risk almost alone. That is why her performance still matters. She proved that a female superhero could lead. She proved that audiences would connect with a woman who was powerful without being cruel. She proved that sincerity could survive spectacle. And perhaps most importantly, she proved that a character written on a comic book page could become something real in the hearts of viewers. But there was still another side to the story, the private side. Because while the world celebrated Wonder Woman, Lynda Carter was also living the life of a real woman behind the image, facing personal challenges, career uncertainty, public expectations, and the quiet difficulty of being recognized everywhere for a version of herself that belonged to another era. The world saw the bracelets, but Lynda knew the weight behind them. The world saw Wonder Woman as fearless. But Lynda Carter knew that real courage often happens quietly, far away from cameras. Once the series became a phenomenon, her life changed in ways that were difficult to control. Suddenly, she was not just walking into auditions or rehearsals as a young actress trying to build a career. She was walking into rooms where people already had an idea of who she was. Before she said a word, they saw the costume. They saw the spin. They saw the Amazon princess, and sometimes that made it harder for them to see the woman underneath. That is the hidden danger of becoming iconic too soon. For Lynda, Wonder Woman had opened the door to immortality, but it had also placed her inside a very specific image. Hollywood loved what she had done, but Hollywood can be cruel when it comes to reinvention. The same industry that celebrates a star for creating something unforgettable can later punish that star for being too closely associated with it. Producers may admire the legacy, but still wonder whether the audience can accept the actor as anyone else. That was the challenge Lynda Carter had to face. She was talented beyond the role. She could sing. She could perform live. She could handle comedy, drama, interviews, variety specials, and emotional storytelling. But to millions of people, she would always be Wonder Woman first. That kind of love is beautiful, but it is also complicated. Fans did not mean to trap her. They were simply holding on to what she represented in their own lives. And that representation was powerful. For many women, Lynda Carter's Wonder Woman arrived at exactly the right time. The 1970s were filled with cultural conversations about gender, independence, equality, and identity. Women were demanding to be seen as more than wives, mothers, secretaries, or background figures in someone else's story. And then, on television, there was Diana Prince, elegant, intelligent, strong, and unashamed. She did not ask permission to be powerful. That mattered. But Lynda Carter's genius was that she never played Wonder Woman as a cold symbol. She gave her warmth. She gave her humor. She gave her patience. She gave her a kind of emotional honesty that made the fantasy believable. Viewers were not simply impressed by her strength. They trusted her. That trust became the foundation of her legacy. Still, the public often forgets that symbols are carried by human beings. Every time Lynda appeared at events, interviews, or fan gatherings, people wanted a piece of the memory. They wanted the smile. They wanted the magic. They wanted the feeling they had when they were children watching her on television. And Lynda, with grace, gave them that feeling again and again. But no person can live forever as a frozen image from the past. As the years moved on, Lynda had to define herself beyond the role without rejecting the role. That balance required maturity. Some actors spend their lives fighting the character that made them famous. Others surrender completely and stop trying to grow. Lynda chose a more difficult path. She honored Wonder Woman while continuing to live as Lynda Carter. That choice is one reason fans still respect her. She never treated Wonder Woman as something beneath her. She never mocked the role or acted embarrassed by the costume. She understood that for many people, the character was not silly at all. It was meaningful. It gave them courage. It gave them a model of strength that did not depend on cruelty. It taught them that kindness could be powerful, that beauty could coexist with intelligence, and that femininity did not need to apologize. That message became even more important as superhero culture changed. Decades after Lynda Carter first stepped into the role, Wonder Woman returned to the big screen for a new generation. The costumes were different. The effects were bigger. The battles were louder. The budgets were massive. But even with all that modern power, the shadow of Lynda Carter remained. Every new version of Wonder Woman had to stand beside the memory of the original. That is not because Lynda had the biggest explosions or the most advanced visual effects. It is because she had sincerity. Her performance came from a time when television could not hide behind digital spectacle. If the audience did not believe the actor, the whole illusion collapsed. Lynda had to sell the character with her face, her voice, her posture, and her heart. She had to make viewers believe that a woman in a bright costume could still carry dignity. And somehow she did. That is harder than people realize. Anyone can wear a costume. Very few can turn it into mythology. Lynda Carter did. And when she speaks about becoming Wonder Woman, the deeper story is not just about an audition, a casting decision, or a television hit. It is about timing, instinct, pressure, and identity. It is about a young woman entering a role that could have destroyed her credibility if handled badly, and instead turning it into the defining performance of her life. She became the original Wonder Woman not simply because she was chosen. She became the original Wonder Woman because she understood her. She understood that Diana Prince was not powerful because she wanted applause. She was powerful because she believed in justice. She understood that the character's strength was not about humiliating men or proving superiority. It was about protecting people who could not protect themselves. It was about standing in danger without losing compassion. That is why the role endured. And that is why, All these years later, when people hear the name Lynda Carter, they do not just remember a television show. They remember the moment a woman became a hero and made the world believe. But the story of Lynda Carter becoming Wonder Woman did not end when the cameras stopped rolling. In many ways, that was only the beginning of the real test. During the height of the show's popularity, Lynda was admired everywhere she went. Her face was on magazines. Her image was printed on posters. Children recognized her instantly. Adults watched her with fascination. She had become one of the most recognizable women on television, but recognition is not the same as freedom. Fame can open doors, but it can also follow a person like a shadow. For Lynda, the shadow was not dark in the usual sense. It was made of love, nostalgia, and expectation. People adored her, but they also wanted her to remain exactly as they remembered her. They wanted the same smile, the same confidence, the same impossible image of perfection. They wanted Wonder Woman, not always understanding that behind the symbol was a real woman still trying to grow. That is one of the most difficult parts of becoming a legend. The public remembers one chapter, but life keeps moving. After Wonder Woman, Lynda had to make choices about who she wanted to be. She could have spent the rest of her life simply repeating the same image, living entirely inside the applause of the past. But she had never been only an actress in a superhero costume. Before the fame, she had been a singer, a performer, a woman with artistic ambition beyond one role. Music had always been part of her identity, and returning to it allowed her to remind people that there was more to her than Diana Prince. Still, no matter where she performed or what she did, Wonder Woman was always nearby. Sometimes that kind of legacy can feel unfair. An actor gives everything to a role, and then the role becomes larger than the actor. The world celebrates the character so loudly that the human being can almost disappear behind it. Yet Lynda Carter handled that complicated relationship with unusual grace. She did not reject the role. She did not treat it as a burden to be thrown away. Instead, she seemed to understand something important. Some roles become meaningful because the audience gives them meaning. Wonder Woman was no longer just a television character. She had become a shared memory. For some fans, she represented childhood innocence. For others, she represented female empowerment. For many women, she represented the first time they saw strength portrayed as beautiful, compassionate, and confident. And for many men, she challenged the old idea that heroism had to look masculine. Lynda Carter's performance quietly changed what people believed a hero could be. That is why her version lasted. It was not only the costume. It was not only the theme music. It was not only the transformation spin that became famous around the world. It was the feeling she created. When Lynda Carter appeared as Wonder Woman, she brought a kind of moral clarity that audiences trusted. She did not seem cynical. She did not seem cruel. She did not seem hungry for power. She seemed guided by purpose. That made her different from many heroes who came later. In modern superhero stories, power is often shown through destruction. Cities collapsing, enemies defeated, battles growing bigger and louder. But Lynda's Wonder Woman came from a different emotional place. Her strength was controlled. Her confidence was calm. Her heroism was not about spectacle alone. It was about knowing the difference between right and wrong and choosing courage even when the world doubts you. That was also part of Lynda's own journey. She entered Hollywood at a time when beauty could easily become a limitation. Women who looked like her were often placed in narrow categories. They were expected to be decorative, not commanding. They were expected to be admired, not necessarily respected. But by playing Wonder Woman with intelligence and dignity, Lynda pushed back against those assumptions without needing to shout. She let the performance speak. And the performance said, a woman can be glamorous and still be serious. A woman can be gentle and still be powerful. A woman can be admired for her beauty and still deserve respect for her mind, her discipline, and her presence. That message carried far beyond the screen. As years passed, Lynda Carter became more than the original Wonder Woman. She became a living bridge between generations. Parents who had watched her as children introduced her to their own children. Fans who once pretended to spin into superheroes grew up and realized the deeper meaning of what they had been watching. The show may have looked colorful and simple on the surface, but underneath, it was giving people permission to imagine a different kind of power. That is why her legacy did not fade. Many stars become famous for a moment and then vanish into the past. Lynda Carter remained because she was attached to something larger than celebrity. She was attached to an idea. And ideas, when they touch people deeply enough, do not disappear. But with that kind of legacy comes responsibility. Every time Lynda speaks about Wonder Woman, she is not only discussing an old television role. She's speaking about what the character meant to people who needed her. She is speaking about the girls who saw themselves differently because of Diana Prince. She's speaking about the boys who learned that strength did not belong to men alone. She's speaking about a cultural shift that began quietly, one episode at a time. And perhaps that is the real reason people still listen when Lynda Carter speaks out. They're not only curious about how she got the role. They want to understand how a young woman from Arizona stepped into a costume and somehow turned it into history. The answer is simple, but powerful. She respected the hero before the world fully understood her, and that respect became the heart of everything. Lynda Carter did not approach Wonder Woman as a costume to be worn. She approached her as a responsibility. That may be why the performance never felt empty. Even when the sets looked simple by today's standards, even when the special effects were limited, even when the villains were sometimes exaggerated, Lynda played the role with complete belief. She gave the audience permission to believe because she believed first. That is the part people often forget. A superhero does not become iconic because of power alone. Power can impress people for a moment, but character is what stays. Lynda understood that Diana Prince was not just strong because she could stop danger. She was strong because she carried herself with purpose. She was not trying to prove she was better than anyone else. She was trying to make the world safer, kinder, and more just. That made her different. In Lynda's hands, Wonder Woman was not built on anger. She was built on compassion. She did not walk into a room looking for someone to defeat. She walked in looking for someone to save. That emotional difference gave the character a timeless quality. Audiences could feel that beneath the beauty and the power, there was a moral center. Wonder Woman was not just a fantasy of strength. She was a fantasy of goodness. And goodness, when played sincerely, can be harder to portray than darkness. It is easy to make a character look mysterious, wounded, or dangerous. It is much harder to make a character look pure without making her seem foolish. Lynda Carter found that balance. Her Wonder Woman was innocent in some ways, but never naive. She was kind, but never weak. She was graceful, but never passive. She had authority without arrogance. That was the magic. And perhaps that is why the role touched people so deeply. Viewers did not simply admire her. They felt safe with her. Children believed she would protect them. Women saw a reflection of strength they were rarely allowed to see on television. Men saw a heroine who did not need to copy male heroes to be respected. She was not a female version of someone else. She was entirely herself. That is what made Lynda Carter's performance revolutionary without needing to announce itself as revolutionary. She did not stand in front of the camera and lecture the audience about empowerment. She embodied it. Every calm look, every confident movement, every moment of kindness carried the message. She showed that power could have elegance. She showed that heroism could have heart. She showed that femininity did not have to be softened, hidden, or sacrificed in order to be strong. But carrying that image for the public was not always simple. When a performer becomes connected to a symbol of perfection, people sometimes forget that she is allowed to be imperfect. They forget that she has private fears, disappointments, frustrations, and pain. They forget that the woman behind the hero also has to navigate life like everyone else. Lynda Carter may have played Wonder Woman, but she was never made of steel. That human truth is part of what makes her story more meaningful. Because the real Lynda Carter had to find strength not only on screen, but off screen as well. She had to survive the expectations that came with fame. She had to keep working in an industry that often reduces women to youth, beauty, and marketability. She had to face the reality that Hollywood can celebrate a woman one moment and limit her the next. And through it all, she had to decide whether the role that made her famous would become a cage or a foundation. She chose to make it a foundation. Instead of running from Wonder Woman, she allowed the role to grow with her. As she matured, the meaning of the character matured too. What once looked like a glamorous television role became something deeper, a lifelong connection to fans who had carried that image through their own struggles. People did not simply remember what Lynda looked like in a costume. They remembered what she made them feel. That feeling became her legacy. Years after the original show ended, fans still approached her with emotion in their voices. They told her what Wonder Woman meant to them. They told her how the character gave them courage, confidence, or comfort. Some had watched the show during difficult childhoods. Some had felt invisible before seeing a woman stand at the center of the story. Some had grown up and realized that Lynda Carter's Wonder Woman had quietly shaped their understanding of dignity. Those stories mattered. They proved that the show was not just entertainment. It had become a personal memory for millions of people. And Lynda, instead of dismissing that devotion, seemed to understand its weight. She knew that when people looked at her, they were often looking through time. They were seeing their younger selves. They were seeing a safer world. They were seeing the first hero who made them believe that kindness and strength could live in the same body. That is a rare kind of fame. Many celebrities are remembered for scandal, beauty, money, or controversy. Lynda Carter is remembered for inspiration. Her name still carries warmth because the character she brought to life represented something hopeful. Even when culture changed, even when superhero storytelling became darker and more complex, people still returned to her version because it reminded them of something simple and powerful. A hero should make you believe in better things. And that may be the real reason Lynda Carter became the original Wonder Woman in the eyes of history. Not because she was the first woman to wear the costume on television. Not because she had the perfect look. Not because she became famous. Those things helped, but they were not enough. She became the original Wonder Woman because she gave the character a soul. She transformed Diana Prince from an image into a presence. She made audiences feel that behind every act of strength was compassion. Behind every rescue was purpose. Behind every smile was conviction. And behind the famous costume was a woman who understood that being powerful means nothing if power is not guided by love. That is why her story continues. Because when Lynda Carter speaks about becoming Wonder Woman, she is not only remembering a role. She is remembering the moment her life became connected to something larger than herself. And once that happened, there was no turning back. There was no turning back because Wonder Woman had become more than a role in Lynda Carter's career. It had become part of her identity in the eyes of the world. And that kind of connection is not something an actor can simply remove when the studio lights go dark. For years, people asked her the same questions. What was it like to wear the costume? What was it like to become an icon? Did she know, back then, that the role would last forever? These questions sound simple, but beneath them was something deeper. People were not only asking about a television show. They were asking about a moment in culture when a woman stood in front of America and changed the way heroism looked. Lynda Carter's answer was never about ego. She understood that Wonder Woman survived because the character meant something personal to people. The audience did not just see action scenes. They saw possibility. They saw a woman who could be beautiful without being weak, strong without being cruel, and powerful without losing her heart. That balance was the secret. And perhaps it was also the reason no one could truly replace what Lynda created. Other actresses could play Wonder Woman. Other versions could be bigger, darker, more cinematic, or more modern. But Lynda Carter's version belonged to a particular emotional moment. She appeared when audiences were ready to imagine a different kind of woman on screen, but still unsure whether they could accept her. Lynda helped them accept her by making Wonder Woman feel familiar and extraordinary at the same time. She was not distant. She was not untouchable. She had warmth in her eyes and calmness in her voice. She did not make strength look like a threat. She made it look like protection. That is why her performance reached across generations. For young girls, she became proof that they did not have to wait for someone else to save the day. For boys, she became proof that courage was not owned by men. For parents, she became a rare television figure who could be admired without cynicism. And for anyone who felt small, unseen, or underestimated, Wonder Woman offered a quiet message. You are allowed to stand tall. Lynda Carter carried that message with unusual dignity. But being associated with hope can be difficult. The public often expects hopeful figures to remain cheerful forever. People want their heroes to smile, to inspire, to comfort, and to never show the cracks. Yet Lynda was a real person living a real life. She experienced pressure, professional challenges, personal losses, and the ordinary struggles that fame cannot prevent. The costume may have made her look invincible, but life reminded her, again and again, that no one truly is. That contrast made her connection to Wonder Woman even more profound. Because over time, Lynda's understanding of strength became less about looking powerful and more about enduring. Real strength was not always dramatic. It was not always standing in front of an enemy or lifting a car or deflecting danger with golden bracelets. Sometimes strength was waking up after disappointment. Sometimes it was rebuilding after pain. Sometimes it was accepting that the world may always remember one version of you, while you continue becoming someone new. That is the side of Lynda Carter's story that many people miss. They remember the glamour. They remember the theme song. They remember the transformation. But they do not always think about what it takes to live for decades beside an image that never ages. On screen, Wonder Woman remains young forever. In real life, Lynda grew, changed, and faced the passage of time like everyone else. That could have created bitterness. Instead, it seemed to deepen her perspective. She came to see the role not as something that trapped her, but as something that connected her to people. And that connection became especially powerful when fans shared their stories. Some told her they watched Wonder Woman during lonely childhoods. Some said the character helped them feel brave when they were afraid. Some said Lynda's portrayal gave them the first image of a woman who could command respect without surrendering kindness. Those stories transformed fame into something more meaningful than applause. They made the legacy human. For Lynda Carter, becoming the original Wonder Woman was never only about being chosen for a part. It was about what happened after the choice. It was about how she protected the character's dignity when others might have treated it lightly. It was about how she gave Diana Prince a heart when the role could easily have become a costume-driven fantasy. It was about how she carried the responsibility of being a symbol without allowing the symbol to erase the woman beneath it. That is why her story still matters. In an industry that often moves quickly from one star to the next, Lynda Carter remained unforgettable because she represented something timeless. She stood for courage with compassion. She stood for beauty with intelligence. She stood for strength without cruelty. And in a culture that often confuses power with domination, that kind of message remains rare. When she speaks out about becoming Wonder Woman, people listen because they're listening to someone who lived through the birth of a modern myth. She was there before superhero fame became a machine. She was there when a female-led action series was still considered a gamble. She was there when one performance could either open a door or close it for years. And she opened it. Not with arrogance, not with force, not with scandal. She opened it with grace. That is the truth behind Lynda Carter's journey. She did not simply become Wonder Woman because Hollywood gave her a costume. She became Wonder Woman because she understood that a hero is not defined by how powerful she appears, but by what she chooses to do with that power. And Lynda Carter chose to make people believe. And making people believe may be the hardest thing any performer can do. Because audiences are not easily fooled. They may enjoy costumes, music, lights, and spectacle, but belief requires something deeper. It requires honesty. It requires a performer to bring enough truth to the role that even the most impossible idea begins to feel real. A princess from a hidden island, wearing a red and blue costume, fighting evil in a world filled with danger. On paper, it could have seemed impossible to take seriously. But Lynda Carter made it real. She did it by refusing to play Wonder Woman as a joke. She never winked at the audience as if she were embarrassed. She never treated Diana Prince as a cartoon. Instead, she gave the character respect from the first moment. That respect became contagious. If Lynda believed in Wonder Woman, then viewers could believe in her too. That was the quiet power of her performance. Every time she appeared on screen, she carried herself like someone who knew exactly who she was. There was no desperation in her heroism. No need to prove herself through anger. No need to become hard in order to seem strong. Lynda's Wonder Woman did not beg for respect. She commanded it naturally through dignity. And that dignity became unforgettable. For many viewers, especially those watching in the 1970s, that image was new. Television had shown beautiful women before. It had shown brave women before. It had even shown intelligent women before. But rarely had it combined all of those qualities into one central heroic figure who did not stand behind a man, beside a man, or in service of a man's story. Wonder Woman stood at the center. That changed the emotional language of television. Suddenly, a woman could walk into danger and be the answer. She could solve the problem. She could protect the innocent. She could be admired not only for how she looked, but for what she represented. Lynda Carter understood that responsibility, and she carried it with a rare seriousness. She knew young girls were watching. She knew families were watching. She knew people were forming memories around her. And memories can last longer than careers. That is why, decades later, people still speak about her with such warmth. They are not only remembering an actress, they are remembering a feeling. They remember sitting in front of television and seeing someone who made courage look graceful. They remember the excitement of the transformation, the confidence of the hero, and the comfort of knowing that good could still win. In a world that often feels cruel, that kind of memory matters. Lynda Carter gave people a hero who did not need darkness to be interesting. That is more important than it sounds. Modern storytelling often assumes that pain, trauma, and moral confusion are the only ways to make a character deep. But Lynda's Wonder Woman proved something different. She proved that goodness can have depth, compassion can have power, hope can be dramatic. That is a difficult lesson for Hollywood to remember. It is easy to create a hero who suffers. It is harder to create a hero who inspires without seeming simple. Lynda found the emotional center of Wonder Woman and protected it. She allowed Diana Prince to be idealistic without making her foolish. She allowed her to be gentle without making her passive. She allowed her to be powerful without making her cruel. That balance is why the role never disappeared from public memory. But as much as Wonder Woman gave Lynda Carter a place in history, it also demanded that she live with constant comparison. Every new version of the character brought people back to her. Every discussion of Wonder Woman's legacy returned to the original face that had made millions believe. That kind of praise is beautiful, but it also means a person never fully leaves the past behind. Lynda had to carry her younger self everywhere. The world remembered her in the costume, spinning into history. But she remembered the long working days, the pressure, the doubts, the uncertainty, and the private moments no audience ever saw. She remembered what it felt like to be a young woman trying to prove that she was more than a beautiful face. She remembered the risk of taking a role that could have easily been mocked. She remembered the responsibility of becoming a symbol before she had fully understood the price of being one. That is what makes her story so compelling. From the outside, it may look like a fairy tale. A beautiful young woman wins a major role, becomes famous, and turns into an icon. But the deeper truth is more complicated. Lynda Carter had to survive the industry's assumptions, the public's expectations, and the strange loneliness of being seen by everyone, but not always fully known. Fame can make a person visible and invisible at the same time. Everyone knows the image. Not everyone knows the woman. And yet, Lynda Carter never allowed that contradiction to turn her against the fans who loved her. She understood that their affection came from a genuine place. When people called her Wonder Woman, they were not trying to erase Lynda. They were trying to thank her. They were thanking her for a childhood memory, for a moment of confidence, for a symbol that helped them stand taller. That gratitude became part of her life. And perhaps that is why her legacy feels different from many celebrity legacies. It is not built on shock. It is not built on scandal. It is not built on a mystery that needs to be solved. It is built on something much rarer: trust. People trusted Lynda Carter as Wonder Woman. They trusted the kindness in her performance. They trusted the strength in her presence. They trusted that when she appeared, she represented something good. That trust is difficult to earn and almost impossible to fake. It is also why, when Lynda Carter speaks about becoming the original Wonder Woman, the story still matters. Because she is not only describing how she got a role, she is describing how a woman stepped into a cultural opening at exactly the right time and filled it with grace. She became a hero on screen. But more importantly, she helped millions believe that heroism could look like a woman.